$250,000, you're only supposed to pull off 3%. That means I'm living on $7,500 a year. So I'm now making $7,500 per month. I'm making as much as in a month as what a financial advisor would make you in a year. Not because I'm amazing, but because, again, I'm leveraging and realize that there's these alternative solutions that financial advisors either won't offer you because they legally can't, or two, they don't want you to know about because they will lose all their business, because mutual funds honestly suck. They're mediocre returns. The market's averaged 7.75% in the last 30 years in the S&P. Yet, even with those mediocre returns, you're taking all these high risks and hoping that the market doesn't tank right when you're going to use that money. It's just, you really, when you start to realize this whole other world's out there and that you can actually have real assets backed by real actual value, it's amazing. It almost seems like a joke to even want to invest in any of those other areas.
Imagine it's 12 months from now and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day, to have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward. How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want, to be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Rich Your Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richyoursoul.com. Today's quote is from Sam Zell. You can have all the assets in the world you want, but if you have no liquidity, it doesn't matter. Here's the reality. 401ks lack a lot of liquidity, as do other investments. And we're going to chat about that today. Have you ever felt like traditional financial advice was failing you? Here's the reality. Most of what people tell you today was before inflation. Back during the days of inflation, it was a whole different story. The other thing is, the way they tell you to build wealth isn't the way they built wealth. Well, today's guest rebelled against the standard path and figured out how to retire in his 20s. Chris Miles went from financial advisor to anti-financial advisor after realizing he couldn't help clients attain true financial freedom using conventional strategies. He began questioning the accepted narratives around money and searched for alternative wealth-building methods. In our interview today, Chris explains how he was able to retire early through multiple passive income streams. He shares why mindset is the crucial starting point and how we must choose abundance in the face of scarcity. We've talked about that many times before. He's going to reveal why he believes 401ks, IRAs, and most mutual funds are essentially useless for the average person. Now that's thought-provoking. Whether you're an entrepreneur or an employee, Chris is going to provide us some unconventional wisdom to help you take control of your financial destiny. We'll talk about money mindsets as we always do, and we'll explore how to escape the rat race. Create your own path to live in the life of your dreams. Let's meet Chris. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Chris Miles. It's great to have you join us today.
Hey, Rocky, it's such an honor to be here. I'm excited for today's conversation.
I'm excited, too, to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Well, I wouldn't say school would teach me a whole lot other than how to write checks and balance checkbooks and check registers, which so is not useful today. Being raised as a kid, I wasn't taught a lot about money other than there was a scarcity of it, right? my father would teach things, he would say things like, well, we can't afford this. What do you think? Money grows on trees? I'm not made of money, And he would even say things, even about his work, which was, you know what? I think my job's going to get strokes by the time he was in his 40s, heart attacks by his 50s. The stress was compounding on him so much that I vowed as a kid never to become like that, especially with my money conversations. I wanted to make sure that I took a different path, not of scarcity, but of controlling my own destiny and my own freedom, which is kind of what led me into business in the first place.
What kind of work did he do?
He worked doing automotive parts sales. So he would be the guy that goes into like the dealerships or the garages. If you ever heard like CarQuest Auto Parts, he was working with one of the distributors to help distribute a lot of their parts.
Okay. So sales can always be stressful, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably what drove it. Did those mindsets of scarcity hold you back?
Absolutely. I mean, because the main thing he would teach is it's kind of like the Dave Ramsey style, right? It was very Depression era mentality. He would say things like, just try to spend nothing, spend as little as you can. He was very much of a tightwad. We would say cheap. He would say frugal, but it was really the former, right? So very much the tightwad. He would try to buy everything on sale, case lot type sales. He has Mrs. Buttersworth syrup that he's had for 20 years because it was on sale and he won't throw it away. Kind of a hoarder. And same thing with his saving. He would try to hoard and save money too. So, I mean, now he never really opened up his finances, but really the thing he was teaching was just, hey, you need to save every dime you can.
How did you overcome that? Or did you?
Not at first. I vowed not to be like that. And my mom, she was the opposite. She was, where he worked for like the job, he was trying to go for the stable job. He worked for 40 years, but they would lay him off from time to time or cut his hours or his area back where he was. So they would essentially cut his commissions back every time he would be successful, right? My mom was on the other side of the coin. She was an entrepreneur. She was an artist, same master painter that trained Bob Ross, trained my mom. So she did that, but again, it was more of the starving artist mentality. So there's still a scarcity, but more the lack of having money. Almost like, you have to die for your artwork to be worth something someday, that kind of mentality. So when I got to college, I thought, okay, I'm going to be the first one in my family to go to college. I'm going to do something different. And while I was in college, my intention was to become a business consultant. But I figured, I'm one of those people that I feel like you shouldn't just have book smarts. You should have real life experience. That's something my dad did instill in me. He's like, you need real life, hard experience because that's what really pays off. So I decided to take a sabbatical for get my bachelor's degree before I went to get my MBA. Took a little 1-year sabbatical. It was supposed to be at least. And I tried to find some business to start. And the first one that came up that was intriguing to me was being a financial advisor, not realizing that you didn't have to really audition for it. It wasn't something that was only for the few, the proud. It was pretty much if you don't have a criminal record and you could pass a test with at least 70%, you qualify. So that's the path I started taking. And as I started becoming an entrepreneur, I realized I could have control of my own destiny, my time, my money, and everything else. I liked it so much that I actually dropped out of college. I didn't go back because I knew that there was a better path taking the entrepreneur path instead.
How did you get such an aha at such a young age?
I think my dad would teach me a lot that way. I mean, both my parents taught me different things. He was teaching me always to be thinking critically, right? Question everything. And maybe that's just because, his generation, of course, witnessed Watergate, and everything else. So you had to really think critically about things. And plus, I studied a lot. I just, I'm one of those people like, I like to see proof. I'm kind of a scientist at heart. I used to, as a kid, little known fact, I used to want to be an astronomer or a physicist. So I love testing things and experimenting and see what would work. And so I kind of look at life that way. It's an experimentation, right? It's like, what's going to work? Does this work or not work? And if it doesn't, let's try something else. And that's where, going down the entrepreneur path wasn't my intended path. Because again, being a business consultant was pretty much being a business owner. But I wanted that real experience to kind of give me an extra edge when I got my degree, right? I wanted to have that extra boosted resume versus just saying, oh, I have a degree. And I'd seen that. I'd seen people that have degrees become professors because they can't make it in the real world. So I want to be somebody who can make it in the real world.
It's funny you made that concept about thinking critically because of the time you grew up in. I would say it's even more important today.
Yeah, there's a lack of it lately, hasn't there? I was Generation X, so Generation X, we were the latchkey kids. We don't trust anybody. We just independent, try to raise ourselves. And that was kind of my childhood a little bit growing up too. But yeah, nowadays you see a lot of people just say, you know what, you just accept what people tell you. Yeah, if it doesn't fit your narrative, then it's never true, right? But if there's an echo chamber, you're just going to keep listening and believing that echo chamber. And you're right. I mean, I think critical thinking is such a valuable skill that very few people are really exercising these days. Not that they don't have it. I just don't feel like they're exercising as much to create more strength in that ability.
Makes sense. So you don't go back to school, you start the entrepreneur path, and then you retire at 28. How'd that happen?
Yeah. So it happened by me doing the opposite of what I was taught as a financial advisor. To give you some context, kind of going back to my dad's story again, right? Is, after I was a financial advisor for several years, my dad calls me up and says, Chris, when are you going to advise me? Now, I never expected him to ask that question because, he was the one that always gave me the advice. But then the tables were turning. He said, I want you to give me advice. So I went back, sat at the same kitchen table where he was giving me money tips. I'm now sitting as his quote unquote financial advisor to help him out. He says, Chris, I'm 61 years old. Y2K was not fun on my portfolio. What can I do to retire right now? And so the first time in my life I see his finances, he had paid off all of his debt. He was mortgage free even after 18 years. So he's very proud of that. He had saved in his 401k, just like everybody teaches you, right? He had done everything that I had taught as a financial advisor. And then when I looked at his numbers, I said, Dad, here's the deal. If you retire today, you better hope you die in 5 years because that's how long your money will last you. So despite him being cheap, saving everything he could, saving it forever, putting it away, doing all those things he had to do, he still didn't have enough. And of course he said, well, what else can I do? I said, I don't know, because I could throw you in other stock market stuff. What if the market goes down? I kind of dodged a bullet there, by the way, because if I had put him in the stock market, that would have been worse, right before the Great Recession, right? But I was just like, I can't guarantee to make you more money than what you're doing right now. I mean, the only thing you can do is just not retire, keep working. And it bugged me a lot. And I remember it was just a few weeks later. It's like when the student's ready, the teacher appears. A few weeks later, I'm speaking with a friend who I trained to be a financial advisor, but then quit to go do real estate investing and partner with his dad on some of those deals. And he's telling me how his dad had doubled his income as a professor at the local university. I thought, come on, that's too good to be true. There's no way that you could be making that much money in just months. And finally, he challenged me. He said, Chris, how many of your clients are truly financially free where they don't worry about money? And I said, well, none, because even the retired ones still worry about running out of money. They don't want to outlive it. And that's a common theme even to this day. He said, okay, great. How about this? How many of you guys as financial advisors, because you guys should have it figured out, right? So how many of you as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning, but doing these same investments? And as I thought about it, there was over 100 guys in our office, and realizing that there had been guys working there since the late 1970s, and still they couldn't retire. My answer was, I don't know, none. There might be one guy in that office, but I would say none, maybe. And I was right. It was none. I found out later the one I questioned wasn't even close to retirement. He was just all, as they say in Texas, all hat and no cattle. And that was a big epiphany for me. And so I said, well, give me the answer. No, I won't give you the answer, Chris, because you just got done arguing that stocks were better. I said, listen, I'm open. You got me. I want to find something else. Again, I want real life proof. Give me something here. And so he had me read a book called Who Took My Money by Robert Kiyosaki. And then he had me listen to this AM talk radio show that's no longer on anymore, but it was back in the mid 2000s, pre-podcast era mostly. And he says, listen to these two real estate investors. And so I did. And over the next few months, I had to make a choice. Either one, I put my blinders on and I keep working my profession because it already hit its all-time high, as a financial advisor. Or two, I quit and keep my integrity intact. I chose the latter. I said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. I'm just going to be a mortgage broker and I'll teach ballroom dancing on the side. And that's what I did. And in the process of doing that, of course, I wanted to start learning what these other guys knew, because I knew there was guys in their 20s and 30s that were financially free, but I'd never seen that happen in the financial advisor space. And so as I started to learn from them, started to do things with like real estate investing, even like other streams of income, pretty soon my expenses were only $3,500 a month, but pretty soon I'm making about $4,000 or $5,000 a month maybe working a couple hours a week at most. And that's when I realized something. I said, wait a minute, I'm 28, almost 29 years old. I could actually retire. I could quit doing mortgages if I wanted to. I could, I'm ballroom dancing. I wasn't really getting paid anyways. So I could pretty much quit right now. And that was a huge epiphany to me, because I thought I'd have to scrimp and save, just like my dad did, for decades to then have hopefully at least $2 million so that I can live on that 3%, $60,000 a year. And I thought that would be the dream, to live on $5,000 a month, because that's a good, comfortable living. Not anymore, but it was then, and back 20 plus years ago. And so that's what kind of blew my mind. And I didn't really know what to do with my life for a while, but then 2007, I know we were talking about before the air, I partnered up with some people, including guys like Garrett Gunderson, who wrote Killing Sacred Cows, launched a business together and started teaching people how to get out of the rat race. And so that's kind of what led down my path to where I am today.
What kind of real estate were you doing?
Mostly just rentals, a little bit of flipping real estate, which is not passive at all. That's more active. Like I took my starter home, I actually sold it to an investor at full appraised value, leased it back, and then subleased it to a tenant. So I was able to strip out all my equity by selling to an investor, and then turn around and then turn it into a rental as well. So I got my equity out, and then I could still make some income off of that. So I was doing things like that. Another thing that surprised me that I wasn't expecting to create passive income from, I would put in the category of more residual income, was I mentioned I was being a mortgage broker. Well, I remember one of my friends who was a millionaire and a real estate investor, and he asked me, he said, Chris, if money were no issue, what would you spend your time doing? And I said, well, maybe I'll travel. He's like, come on, let's be honest, Chris. Would you travel 52 weeks of the year? Okay, no, maybe less than that. He's like, all right, what would you do the other 45 weeks out of the year? And I said, well, maybe I'll teach ballroom dancing. Like, I really love doing that. And little known fact, I was also one of the nation's top amateur ballroom dancers 5 years prior to this conversation. And so I said, no, maybe I'll start doing that. And then he said, well, what about the mortgage business that you're in? And you're kind of doing that, part-time. Would you keep doing the mortgage business if money were no issue? I said, no. I said, I love teaching about it. I love getting creative to help people figure out how to use the equity, take it to invest and do things. But I just hate paperwork. I can't stand it. I said, well, Chris, why don't you find somebody else who likes doing paperwork? No, come on. There's nobody that likes doing paperwork. There's no nerds out there like that. Chris, trust me, there are nerds that like to do paperwork. He's like, go find that person and ask him to split the deal. And so I asked the head of the mortgage company, I said, who do you know that would fit this description? Talk to Clark. Clark is your guy. I go to Clark. I say, Clark, I've been telling people like a cool strategy about, taking the equity from their house, investing it, making more than their payment. So it actually pays for the payment and gives them extra. They're already ready to do a mortgage. I just don't like doing the paperwork. Would you be willing to do that and split me 50-50? It said, well, yeah, of course. I don't have to find them. I just have to go and do my work. Put my head down and get behind a desk. I'll do it. And so that's what we did. So I would spend maybe a half hour or so educating a client. And they'd say, cool, how do I get this mortgage? Talk to Clark. Let Clark do it. So Clark would do all the work. And a month or two later, I'm getting a check for like $1,000 or $2,000. So on top of getting this passive income from rentals, I'm also now getting passive income from things like this mortgage business. And again, I wasn't like out there promoting this business. It was literally just friends and family and whatever friends they would refer to me. And that was it. And I even started doing this to other companies. I actually went to a wholesale jeweler in Salt Lake. I said, hey, I get people to ask me about, buying their wedding band or their engagement ring. And I know you guys charge a third of the cost. Do you have a referral program? They said, yeah, we'll pay you 5% kickback on that. I said, great. And so every once in a while, somebody come to me and be like, yeah, I'm going to get engaged soon. Don't buy the ring yet. Go to these guys. You'll save a ton of money. And then they would be happy. They save money. And so would the business. And then I get a check. And so I did that with a couple different businesses. And that's where I was, like I said, I was making like easily $4,000 or $5,000 a month doing with really not even having a business. It was purely just word of mouth, just random conversations that would lead to something like this. And so it was an interesting time because I never thought it would be that easy because I had struggled and hustled, quote unquote, as they say today, right? I was hustling like crazy as a financial advisor to make the same or maybe even less income. And now, because I was just doing it with leverage, whether it's my money leveraging or even just leveraging other people, I was able to make a lot more money with less time.
That's an incredible story. And you had the right people around you who kind of gave you your way out to make money without having to work that hard. And that's the key. And that still comes back to a money mindset of, well, you have to work hard to make money. And if you can't break that, then none of this stuff is going to work, because you're like, oh, I can't do that. I have to work hard to make money. And if I don't work hard, then I won't make money. But you can actually make money easy ways, especially when you learn how.
And that's true. That for me to be open to that, there was a principle I had to ingrain in myself to even see it in the first place and listen and adhere to it. And it actually was those two guys on that radio show all the time. They wouldn't even talk about the real estate strategies. It drove me nuts that they wouldn't get strategic. I get way more strategic on my podcast than they do. But they would purely just talk about principles from the founding fathers and such, right? And one of the principles they talked about that I did ingrain into myself, like really just hammer down onto that one, was that dollars follow value. Dollars follow the value you create for other people, right? And they were really big into that. And that's what started happening. Instead of asking, how do I make more money, which has always been my question, and it never really led to more money. But when they said, listen, if you can find a way to exchange value, how do you serve people, solve problems, or add value in such a way that money is just a natural exchange or byproduct? How do you do that? And so I started obsessing over the question about how to create the win-win. That's why when I listened to my friend, he said, well, refer to this guy. And then I thought, wait a minute, I could refer to other people. It doesn't have to be all me, because I believed, like you said, work hard, put your head down, because that's what my dad taught me, right? I was always taught that as a kid, and there's some good values to that. But you turn your brain off sometimes and you just use your muscles, right? And so when I got to the point of saying, wait a minute, how do I create a win-win? How do I give people what they want? And if it's not me that delivers it, who can help them get it? So really, I became a connector, right? I became somebody to be a problem solver for people. And that's even true to this day. Even though I don't monetize most everything I do as a value creator that way, sometimes I'm just listening to conversations to see what do people need in their personal life or their business life that would help them. Is that, can I make a connection for them? Can I help them with any kind of advice or anything of that nature? And most time it's free, but when I became more of a servant-hearted kind of person and focusing on that, money became formulaic. It became easy.
It's fun when money's easy.
A lot more fun.
A lot more fun. So let's kind of look at the other side of the coin, because I've seen you say if people make a lot of money, then they're living the high life and then they're living free. Is that true?
Oh, that's so not true. Now, I will say this, making more money does help, right? It does help to get rid of the burden of how do I pay my bills and that sort of thing. So there's a different level. But I'll tell you, I'm in several mastermind groups, especially in the real estate investor space. Guys that you would see on social media with millions of followers on TikTok and whatnot and Instagram. And again, some of them are very successful. But there's a lot of people that I know in that real estate space that, yeah, they got the nice car, they got a nice lifestyle, they can afford the nice trips, but there's still something missing. And what's missing is freedom. Because you have to understand that, you hear the saying, people say, don't ever take advice from somebody you don't want to change, you don't want to trade places with, right? That you don't want to be in their shoes too. And that's good advice to a degree. But many people will look at someone and say, hey, look, you make lots of money. Your life looks amazing. I want to do what you do. Oh, you're a dentist? Great. I'll become a dentist, right? Oh, you're a doctor. I'll be a doctor. You're an attorney. I'll be an attorney, right? They kind of just follow the, what did you quote unquote do? You're a real estate investor. I'll go do real estate. The problem is this, that many of these people have a business of real estate investing, but they're not financially free. They might make millions of dollars in that business, but if that business were to shut down today, they would be just as broke as everybody else because they don't have one key element, and that's passive income. Every person, employee, and definitely business owners need multiple streams of income coming in that's passive, that you don't have to work for, that actually allows you that if anything were to happen to your main stream of income, you have a backup plan. For example, we're hearing about the Hollywood strikes going on right now, right? The writer's strikes and everything else. I've got a client right now that's in Hollywood that every time COVID shuts them down, strikes shut them down, he is so grateful that he doesn't get desperate like a lot of his coworkers do, because he knows, you know what? I'm a set designer. If Hollywood shuts down, I still have passive income coming in to pay my bills. and he's almost 100%. He's not quite 100% there. He's like, I think he said last was 88% of the number he needs to hit to pay all of his bills. But still, that's significant. If you're knowing that you have 88% of your bills covered by your passive investments, even if you're out of work, you come from a bigger place of power. And I'll tell you, as an entrepreneur, if you want to get to a place where business is easier, get to a place where you're in an abundant mindset where you don't need money, where you don't need that customer or that client. When you come from that place, it's amazing how many more people want to do business with you when you don't care about getting their business, when you don't need their business. I call it business breath, right? When you're desperate for business, you're the guy handing out the business cards at the networking events like Chinese stars. You're throwing them at people left and right and slicing them up. You don't need to do that. Like, you can be in a much more relaxed place and therefore come from a position of power and leverage when you do your business.
And I agree with that. Very much so. And desperation does not, and that's the problem. I think people don't realize is the time to make money is not when you need it most. That's the hardest time to get money. So it's one of those idiosyncrasies that we don't always understand. So when you say passive income, and before we get to that, I just want to make one comment. I've seen the numbers on some of those real estate guys. They're not making money. They're moving money from one deal to the next, to the next, to the next, and they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I'm guessing that some of them have fancy cars or only in the YouTube videos. In reality, they don't always exist. So be careful who you follow. A lot of those guys are nothing like what you think they are. Getting back, What do you consider passive income? Because I'll be honest, I think for a lot of people who talk about passive income, their passive income is pretty damn active.
I agree. There's a lot of charlatans and slick salespeople out there trying to tell you it's passive, right? Let's do the Amazon store, which then you find out there's a lot more work behind that. Or, hey, why don't you go do real estate investing? But then they're teaching you how to flip a property and or wholesale a property where you have to create a brand new business working part-time or even full-time to make all that money they talk about. And I'm not saying you can't make a lot of money doing those things, but I believe the passive income should be more passive. Now, I don't mean brain off. I don't mean that you don't manage your money, that you just set and forget it like crappy financial advisors have taught you for years, right? I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about really like just having your money, letting it work for you while you don't have to work so hard for it. That's what I mean by passive income. So, for example, let's use real estate. You have like rentals. Many people will buy a rental in their own backyard. They'll manage it themselves. They'll try to find the tenants. They'll try to deal with all the headaches, the tenants, the toilets, and the trash, as I say. They're dealing with all that crap. It's really a part-time job. What I do when I buy rentals, and I do other investing too in the real estate space, but rentals is one of them. I do it's called turnkey rentals. Turnkey rentals, instead, I can buy a rental anywhere in the country. In fact, I don't want to buy it in my backyard because anything in the western half of the United States, real estate's just overpriced compared to the rent payments. You just can't cash flow well. But out in the Southeast, the Midwest, I can make a lot more money with less. So I instead have turnkey companies that actually help me find these properties. They've already renovated them. They've made them rent ready. They can even tell me ahead of time how much money I'm going to make on that rent with profits. And even if I factor in trying to buy it with a mortgage and everything else, I can know within pretty much within a few dollars exactly how much money I'm going to make on that deal before I buy it. And the great thing is I don't have to manage it because they'll manage it for me. So it's hands off that way. Now I have to manage the property manager. And sometimes if you have a crappy property manager, then you find out it's not as passive as you'd like. But I love the fact that I've had rentals like in Tennessee for last 5 years, same renter. We keep renewing her lease, charging her more every year, and we're pretty fair on that pricing too. And I just keep making more and more money and don't deal with the hassle. Every few years, the property management company will say, hey, we want to just do a little refresh of carpets and paint, $300. You cool with that? Yes, please go ahead. It's just nice and easy. And it's not always that way, but it can be. It can be definitely a lot easier than trying to do it yourself. That's the problem. Most people that do it themselves end up spending more time working and making less profit and money. So that's one example. Another one, you can lend your money like you're the bank. I have this is actually something I've been recommending more lately is for myself is I've been lending money out to investors that they're doing the investing, but I lend them the money, and then they pay me back on those terms. It could be anywhere from like 10, 12+% a year, and I'm getting paid on that money. So be able to do that into those kind of deals. Sometimes even they'll pool money together. They'll do funds. So maybe you're not just invested in one project. You might be invested in multiple projects, right? I have a friend in New Jersey right now that he goes and renovates properties in Jersey and makes money off that. But he also has a portfolio down like in Atlanta and Alabama for like, apartment buildings and things like that. And that's the cool thing. I can pool money together with other people and have a percentage in apartment buildings. I can go buy self-storage units. I can go and invest in oil and gas, which has been great lately. Even though the price has been low, still has been very profitable. And as prices go up, we make more, right? Even raw land. I don't do the raw land myself. I have a partner that they're the raw land expert. I let them do it all. I'm the financer. And then we split the profits. And I invested a $250,000 with them just a year and a half ago, and it's kicking off $7,500 a month. I mean, so it's great leverage compared to if I put a $250,000 in a mutual fund, $250,000, you're only supposed to pull off 3%. That means I'm living on $7,500 a year. So I'm now making $7,500 per month. I'm making as much as in a month as what a financial advisor would make you in a year. Not because I'm amazing, but because again, I'm leveraging and realize that there's these alternative solutions that financial advisors either won't offer you because they legally can't, or two, they don't want you to know about because they will lose all their business because mutual funds honestly suck. They're mediocre returns. The market's averaged 7.75% in the last 30 years in the S&P. Yet, even with those mediocre returns, you're taking all these high risks and hoping that the market doesn't tank right when you're going to use that money. It's just, you really, when you start to realize this whole other world's out there and that you can actually have real assets backed by real actual value, it's amazing. It almost seems like a joke to even want to invest in any of those other areas.
And that's the thing. Financial advisors are only taught one slice of the pie, and they don't know that there's a ton of other ways to make money. And many of the other ways are more profitable. However, you have to understand how they work, and you have to get involved, and you have to learn a little and put some effort into it.
This is telling it all of financial advisors, because I used to be one, right? And I realized I was a salesman in a suit, but once a year, I go to a study group with these advisors, and all of us make at least $1 million to $10 million, $100 million a year. Every year, there's always some financial advisor that pulls me aside and quietly asks, Chris, so I can't retire. How can I do it like what you did? How do I retire like you? Like, what are you investing in? And how are you doing that? Again, these guys make millions. This is why I say don't fall into the trap of finding people that look like, because they make good money. Making money in the financial advisor world just means they're good salespeople. It does not mean they're good managing and growing their money. That is a key difference between those two skill sets. So be very careful again about who you listen to.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. And I think that leads right into what my next question was, which is something you talk about, which is get lean, get liquid, get out. Can you explain that?
Yeah, those three things in that order is so critical if you want to create freedom for your life right now. It's what's worked for me. It's worked for many, many of our clients. Many of them are financially free right now. Here's what I mean by that. So get lean. This is the one that probably most of the Dave Ramsey followers would say, yeah, that makes sense. But it's different. So get lean means really being productive with the money you're spending, right? Make sure you're spending on things that actually, one, are useful in your life, and or two, bring you joy. So for example, I was interviewed earlier today on another show, and the guy said, well, yeah, if you just cut out that latte, you're paying $6 a day. That's $30 a week. That's $120 a month. That's $1,500 a year. You could save yourself by not buying that latte every day. And I said, well, yeah, I'm like, if the latte is not useful in your life because it's not helping your health at all, right? Good, cut it out. But here's the thing, $1,500 a year isn't going to move the needle much for you to create financial freedom. I'm just telling you, nobody can create financial freedom off $6,000 a year with their Roth IRAs. You won't be able to do it with $1,500 a year either. So that's not the point. The point is spend money on the things that actually do serve you in your life while eliminating the things that don't. And this is important. And I know you teach profit first, but even on a personal level, profit first works great because what you should be doing is focusing on profit at home. How do you make sure you have more income coming in than expenses? How do you make sure there's always surplus? How do you eliminate the things that really don't serve you and don't help your life become better? So get rid of stuff. I had somebody who said like, yeah, I had membership and at the gym, and I was paying $100 a month, but I hadn't even been there in months. I'm like, well, get rid of it. Now, if you were using it every month, it's a great expense. But if you're not using that gym membership, save the $100 a month, use it elsewhere, right? Give every dollar a job and make sure it's working hard for you so you don't have to keep working hard for it to go and die. So that's the key. So that's what I mean by get lean. Track your money every week is what I recommend. You can even use things like Mint. Mint's a great app or online tool that I've used. It's free. You can use whatever spreadsheets. If spreadsheets work better for you, do that. Just use whatever works, but track your money on a weekly basis, both income and expenses, and see what you can do to adjust and make things more efficient. That's get lean. Get liquid means get your money out of prison. So for example, if you notice, financial advice is almost always about how do you put your money in prison. Pay extra on that house payment so you can pay down your mortgage eventually in 20 years, right? So put all the extra equity in there. But if you ever want to get it out, you won't be able to get it out. By the way, learned that during the last recession when I tried to get equity out of my house and the bank said, no way. So never a good idea, in my opinion, to just throw equity in your house. I'd rather keep the equity outside of my house until I have more than enough money to pay off the house and then do it in one check. So people say, lock your money up in your house. They say, lock it away in your 401ks and IRAs, and then you can't touch it till you're 59 and a half. And if you try to touch it before then, they're going to slap you with a 10% penalty like you're trying to ask mom and dad for your own car keys, that kind of thing. It's dumb. And so get rid of all that financial advice that says lock your money away. Instead, get your money liquid. Not just for emergency savings, which is very important too, but get your money liquid so then you can then do the third thing, which is get it out, right? Get lean, get liquid, and then get it out. Get it out working for you. This is where the money can start creating passive income right now. Understand that anything taught by a financial advisor creates zero passive income, never creates income. It's always about accumulation and then eventually living on less than the interest so you don't run out of money with inflation, right? That's why they say live on 3%. Anybody that says, by the way, 4%, you can be FIRE, financially independent, retire early, they're full of crap, okay? FIRE, that 4% rule was already debunked years ago. We were questioning it 20 years ago as financial advisors, and we wanted it to be true. But those guys that tell you 4% you're financially free, full of crap, okay? It's 3% at best. And if you're young, if you're like under the age of 40, you want to retire, you better do 2% if you're going to be investing in mutual funds. That's a lot harder to do to try to create that kind of lifestyle if you want to try to keep up with inflation. That's why we do this instead. So let me give you an example of how that worked. I had one client in particular. He actually had stuff money in his 401k and everything through military. He had $1 million. He was lucky enough to save up $1 million. Just so you know, Fidelity came out with their statistics. They have 46 million clients. And guess how many of them have at least $1 million saved up over these many, many years? Only 299,000 as of the end of 2022. So 300,000 out of 46 million. That's like 0.7% success rate. Imagine if you had a business and someone gave you only one out of every 160 people gave you a 5-star review. Do you think people would be in business still if you had that kind of reviews? No, like it sucks. That's a horrible success rate. And even then, that's not success because they've also interviewed those same people with over $1 million of retirement account. 35% when surveyed said it would, quote unquote, take a miracle to be able to retire. So even of that 0.7%, over a third of them are saying it would be a miracle for me ever to retire. Not because it's not a lot of money, but because if you're living on 3% of $1 million, that's $30,000 a year. Well, that was our client, Dan. He had $1 million in his fund, and then his financial advisor says, well, you're 60 years old. Well, now you can pull off $30,000 a year. He said, I'm in California. No one can live on $30,000 a year, including homeless people. Okay. So that's not going to work. So what he did instead is he came to us and we said, well, let's find ways to get it out. So he bought like a few duplexes, that were managed by somebody else. He got in some apartment syndications where, again, you pool your money with other investors and then somebody else is doing all the work. Now, he did some oil and gas things. And before you know it, what was supposed to be $30,000 a year now had turned into $130,000 a year of passive income, not touching his principal, just that interest that's kicking off, providing regular stable income. That's the key difference there. That's the difference between accumulation and passive income.
So I will say I've been using Quicken for over 30 years. I can show you where my money comes and goes. And it's not about budgeting. It's just about awareness. And we sit down every year and go, are we happy with where our money went? Yes or no? Where do we want to change it? How do we want to redo it? The other thing is liquid. And this is the one that I think I learned much later in life. Everyone's taught to save in 401ks. There's two main problems with 401ks. And there are ways around it somewhat, but if you want to do something earlier in life, like start a business or buy a rental house, it's very difficult to do that, if not impossible, inside of a 401k. Very few people build up after-tax money, which allows them the flexibility to do what they want with it. The other thing that nobody talks about with 401ks is when you put money in a 401k, you do get a tax deduction. So you're not paying taxes today. You're paying it in the future.
Kicking the can down the road.
You're kicking the can down the road. But what they don't realize is you have converted capital gains, which are 10 and 15 or maybe 0%, into earned income, which can be 10, 15, 20, 35%. And so
tax rate.
A higher tax rate than had you done it the other way. And I don't see people running that calculation or even talking about the fact that it's a switch off. Third, I'm really mad at Fidelity. I'm one of their top customers. They should be, calling me up and saying thank you once in a while and giving me a little love. But that's another story there.
I've been making a lot of cases against it because I poo-poo on it quite a bit. And you're right. Like there are some ways you can do what's called self-directed IRAs if you have an old 401k. So when we get clients that have 401ks and IRAs, if they're with a current company or an employer, I'll say, okay, you just don't want to contribute to those anymore. It's useless. Unless you're 60 years old right now, you can do what's called in-service distributions where you can put money in, get the match, and then pull it right back out and then invest it. That's great. That can't happen for almost anybody. That's 99% plus the time you can't do that. But if you have an old 401k, we could do some stuff with it, but you have to be careful because you don't get those tax advantages. So someone's like, should I go buy a real estate property? Well, you could, but then you'll lose the tax advantages of depreciation, things like that you get with real estate. Now, if they were to use that money and invest it, say, in like hard money, where you're lending the money out to other people, well, there's no tax advantage there. It works. So you could do that. But for the most part, 401ks and IRAs, the thing you have to understand is it's not your money. You are a benefactor of that money. The U.S. government actually owns and controls your 401k and IRA. And you can look it up. You'll actually realize that your 401k actually says with your name, it's for the benefit of Rocky, right? For the benefit of Chris Miles. It's not actually your money. The government, that's why the government can change the rules whenever they want. If they decide 59 and a half is just too young, they can push it to 62 tomorrow and you have no say in the matter. That's the thing. Like, who would ever enter into a business transaction where the other partner says, hey, listen, like, we're going to be business partners and we can be 50-50, but just so you know, I have controlling interests. So if I decide I want to take out more money, I can take out more money. If I decide that I can tell you when you can take out money, I can tell you when to take out money. Like, I make the rules. You just have to go with it. How many of us would enter in that kind of stupid business transaction? We wouldn't, right? So it's just a cruddy plan that even the guy that created the 401k never intended it to be the way it is today. It was really meant for 1970s tax brackets when they were up closer to 90%. So for those top level executives, it really was a big difference of taxes where they could reduce their tax burden significantly down the road because of how much they were being paid. That's just not the case nowadays.
The world changes. You have to keep changing with it. So you mentioned this a little bit earlier with profit first. You use it in your business. Can you share a little bit? How has that helped you?
Tremendously. I remember reading that book. I think it was 2014, 14 or 15 when I first came across that book. Huge. And then I got to see Mike speak live, and I even had it on my own podcast recently too. The thing that really helped me was one, reversing the mindset, right? The mindset, I think, is, again, it's key with money in general, but it's also key in business, because there's times that I swear the people that I hired were making more money than me. And I remember even when I would teach at business events, I remember one woman coming up and she's like, you know what? We hit record revenue this year. We hit 600,000 a year. Unfortunately, my assistant made 40,000, which was more than I made. The truth is, you're a CEO. You should be the highest paid employee on your team, right? That's the way it should be. And so profit first came at the right turn, and then work it around. Like, how do you work the expenses around? You reverse engineer it in that direction. I love that. I love especially what I learned later from Mike personally, where you create your separate accounts, your separate buckets within your business. So like you have a separate savings. You don't commingle everything. You have a certain account that I'll have, and I'm modified it for my own situation. But I have a certain account that I pay operational things out of, including payroll and things like that. And so I have a certain money that stays in there in that business. But the rest of the money, I can go and put that towards, I use a credit card for some of the other type of expenses. I'll use that as one of my accounts. And then I also use a separate savings account that I keep for the actual profit. And learning to get in that habit of always pulling out profit, which has also been very useful in my personal life, because then I'm always pulling out profit personally, make sure I always put something to savings too. So growing that account, pulling out profit. I think one of the key myths you hear people say is, I'm reinvesting in my business, right? I'm reinvesting in my business. If you're reinvesting 100% of your money into your business, you're not profitable. You're just spending money in your business, right? The key is that, can you take that money out? And then here's the key. If you're a business owner, take those profits out and then use those profits to generate passive income for you personally, so that you start creating more and more security on your home front. And by the way, your spouse will thank you for that. But it also provides protection just in case we get another shutdown where they say you're a quote unquote non-essential business, right? Because you should be open right now because there's another, little bug going around or whatever it might be, right? You don't want to be in that place. You want to be a place of power and certainty in your own life, because when you're in that place, you're a better creator, you're a better visionary, you're a better innovator within your business, and therefore you become more powerful and more profitable.
Not only that, technology changes the world. It's constantly changing. I mean, the iPhone put so many different businesses, so to speak, almost out of business. I mean, before I had an iPhone, I had a Garmin GPS. That thing was expensive. That pretty much went right out the window. And just all the little things that are in there, if you think about what did you used to do? Well, before I had a Palm Pilot, gone out the door. All of these things start to disappear. And before that, people had iPods. I was never a fan of them. That's another thing. I mean, they cannibalize their own business. In the same thing, if I was in the DVD rental business like Blockbuster, boom, I'm out of business, right? Somebody else comes along. And it's funny because I think my kids were just in that in-between stage where everyone used to get the DVD player in the car and the screens and all of that. I don't think anyone even cares anymore because everyone's got their own personal screen in their pocket. So that whole thing kind of disappeared. So you never know when something is going to change in business. And if you haven't built your other streams or your other retirement outside your business, you are at considerable risk. And the reality is most businesses don't last. So either you pivot, in which case you still need money, or you kind of get screwed, I guess.
You're right. I mean, you just never know what's going to happen in life, right? I think the type of business owner I have the hardest time really helping them break away from drinking their own business Kool-Aid are those in direct sales or network marketing, right? I mean, in those businesses, they believe that company will never fail. They will always be loyal to them and things will work out great. But I know people personally that companies, even when they were making millions of dollars for that company says, you know what, today we're canceling your distributorship. You're done. You're going to have to start over with some other company. Oh, but you should have a non-compete. So we don't want you to start with another company, so just be broke for the next year or so. You get people like that, or you get people that say that all of a sudden the company's great, it's strong, and then they sell to somebody else. And then things change the company to where they can't in integrity say, I can't offer these products or these services anymore. everything's always in a constant state of ebb and flow. So the best thing you can do is protect yourself, right? I mean, I have one client right now that they're in the health coaching space. They make great money. They make almost $1 million a year managing other health coaches. However, they're like, our goal, $25,000 a month passive income. We want to make sure that we more than cover our personal expenses at home from other investments, regardless of what happens with this company. Even though it's a great company and they make great money, we're like, we can't promise they'll always be that way. We don't have a crystal ball. They're smart. They're doing what they should be doing. And especially as leaders, like they've been around the block long enough that they don't just drink their own business Kool-Aid. They know that things can happen. And that's the same thing true in my life. That should be true in everybody's life, in my opinion.
And I think this is the one thing people don't realize. A business can bring in $1 million. And like you said, the business owner may not be making any money or very little money at the end of the day. And while it all looks good from the outside, when you start lifting up the covers, you realize that this is not at all what you thought it was, and they're struggling. So kudos to the business owners that do it well and that are highly profitable. I think that is more the rarity than the norm. And I don't think people realize that. It isn't as simple as it looks to be.
Mm-hmm. True.
What else do you help business owners with to help them build their wealth?
Yeah, we really just do two things in our business. I mean, one, we do help people consult with them. Besides one, trying to find money leaks, we actually do try to do that as well, including tax leaks. We have CPAs we refer to, attorneys, things like that. If you have to create new structures, we got a whole system that helps with that. But then also on the other side, how do we create passive income? How do we get your money working for you? And that's one of the big things we help do strategically. We're not investment advisors, so we're not saying you should invest here, you should invest there. What we actually do instead is we say, all right, let's figure out how to get your money out of prison. Where's the available funds that we could be using? And then based on your goals, what are the type of investments you should be doing? And if there's this kind of, let's say it's, turnkey rentals, well, great. We've got 2 or 3 companies that probably are the best right now in the current market conditions. Go talk to them, see what you think, and then you can come and ask us our opinion or whatever. But essentially, they pull the trigger on what they decide to do investment-wise, but we can connect them with vetted investment professionals and people that we already do. So that's the one side where we do consulting. And then we also have another strategy that we have that supports that even helps throw a little bit extra gasoline on the fire to speed up the results. It's many people refer to the concept as infinite banking, but we do it a little bit differently. We do it more where it's better, it's faster, cheaper, actually gets you higher returns. So we call it max ROI infinite banking. Basically, it's just creating a tax-free supercharged savings account that you can then use to create money in 2 places at the same time. You can earn money inside of that account while also leveraging getting a line of credit against it to then invest, earning returns over here. And you actually, say, for example, you get a 10% return on that investment. By using that strategy, you might be able to make that total return go from 10 up to 11, 12, 13%. So it just adds a little extra gasoline on the fire. And as a side benefit, it can even protect your family in case of death and things like that.
You mentioned you had a podcast. I know you've done a ton of interviews. Any ahas come from all of those conversations?
Yeah, we're in our 9th season. So we've had now about 750 episodes. I would say this, and now granted, I'm picky about who I bring on my show, right? Just like you are. I would say the thing that fascinates me is that there's more than one way to create wealth, right? I mean, there's so many different paths up that same mountain, But the one thing that's all in common that you'll notice is that these people realize first and foremost that wealth starts in your mind first, and then it shows up in your bank account. That's the one thing that's always the case. Very rarely do I see somebody say, oh, I'm just really good at selling. I'm just really good at, my business. That's not the case at all. It's usually what's going on between their ears, the things that they know and understand, the perspectives they have, the emotional intelligence that they have, the patience that sometimes are required, the lessons they had to learn along the way. Like, I mean, I've gone broke before. I mean, heck, I went through a divorce even just 7 years ago or so, and almost 8 years ago now. And that divorce, I mean, it sucked. It was horrible, but it actually is the very thing. Also reading one of Mike Michalowicz's books, I was reading Pumpkin Plan. Using that actually got me faster out of that hole. And it got me to create the business I have today, where I worked a lot less while making a lot more profit. So That's the thing, is that everybody has their own different way up this mountain. But if you start to really understand how they think more than just what they did, then I can guarantee you'll see better results in your life.
I always come back to the golf example, right? I can go get lessons from Tiger Woods. It's not going to make a difference. But he has a different way of thinking, probably than every other golfer. I don't know how much he shares of that, but there are probably just his experiences and things that have made him good at what he does. And we all have those talents. I know what mine are in the money space, and it would be hard for someone else to do what I do, just trying to follow my path, because they don't have my experiences. They don't have my innate skills. That's not to say someone else couldn't do it, but they're probably not following my path. They're following their own, right? So while we may be in similar places, we've done it differently. We look at things differently. And I think that's kind of been much more of an aha over the years. And it is true. There's multiple ways to the top of the mountain. You got to pick your path, get your helpers, your Sherpas, to get you up there and help be guides along the way. But you got to do the work. You got to show up and all of that kind of stuff that doesn't always happen.
That's right.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Being abundant. That sounds overly simplified, but it's true. You have to understand what abundance is and how to think abundantly. And that it's a choice you make every day. So for example, I deal with scarcity every day. I deal with fears. I deal with doubts and worries. I deal with all that kind of stuff. I deal with impatience, greed. The more abundant person, the only way to truly live an abundant life is to choose abundance in the face of scarcity, right? How quickly do you move and shift to choosing differently? You feel fear. How quickly can you move to start feeling faith? You start feeling despair. How quickly can you move to hope? You start feeling, at the point where there's just not enough opportunity. How can you get to the point to say there's more than enough opportunity? There's plenty of it. There's no shortage of this. When you can quickly recontextualize and reframe your reality, that's how you can truly have abundance.
And I think this is the one thing you have to realize, no matter how good you get, you still have those thoughts. And then it's a matter of watching them, seeing them, ignoring them, or pushing them aside, dancing with them, however you decide to do it, and moving back to where you want to be.
Yeah. Whenever I have a client that says that, they say, I feel horrible about this, but I'm feeling these doubts. My answer is always the same, is, well, welcome to the human club. We all do. No matter how abundant we are, we still will battle scarcity on a daily basis.
We will. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Besides that, because that was really important, right? I think the thing I learned later in life was trying not to force results. I get so sick and tired of hearing people say, you got to hustle, you got to make it happen, right? You got to work hard, all these things. You got the Gary V's and the Grant Cardones out there telling you got to pretty much put your life on hold to just kill it in business. And if you just do it for a few years, then eventually you'll be free. It's a bunch of crap. The thing I've learned is that the best thing you can do is do it your way, right? You don't have to go and replicate some crazy person that sleeps 3 hours a day. You don't have to be Elon Musk, right? You can do it your way and be happy. And I promise you, if you do your business with the way that makes you happy, you will have more business. Your needs will be met. You will be fine. Stop listening to all the crap of hustle and grind and suffer until someday when your kids are too old to even want to be around you, then you're going to live life.
I love what I do. And because I love what I do, it's not work. And this isn't the right word, but I'll outgrind anyone because it's not a grind, right? It's just what I love to do for fun. And so I'm just going to constantly want to do it. It's going to be an easy path. The word grind doesn't exist.
No.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I would go back to almost what we said towards the beginning, is find mentors that you would be willing to model, right? If their lives you want to model, find them and interview them, question them, ask how they think, not what they did, right? If you can understand how they think, you'll then be able to do what they did in your own way. Just like I said in this last point, that's the best way to do it, is just find those people that you admire, that you want to be like, and then find, and this could be, by the way, this could be somebody you don't even know personally. This could be someone like, you're like, oh, I want to be like, say it's like Tony Robbins. Okay, great. Then you consume Tony Robbins, consume his thoughts and his thinking and his emotions, all that kind of stuff. Get that in your head, get his voice in your head, so that when you approach a certain time period or a certain, situation, you can almost say, WWT, right? WWTD, what would Tony do, so to speak, right? Like, how would Tony respond to this situation? What would he be thinking about this? Use that as kind of like your training wheels until you can start to adopt your own philosophies as you combine these best mentors. Again, books, podcasts, these kind of things are great free resources to get that. If you have somebody in your own personal life you can find too, find them as well.
And if you've ever heard Tony speak, you will know that there is a fire in his belly because of his life situation as a young kid. And if you don't have that, it's going to be really hard to follow his path. And there were years where he was making those infomercials. They were bad and he disappeared for a while. And then he came back, boom. So
that's what Shallow Hal does to his career, right?
It took him a while. And I think that's what people forget. They see Tony today and he's massively successful, but there were a lot of tough times along that way.
Absolutely.
If people would like to learn more about you, the podcast, where can they find you and connect?
You can go to moneyripples.com. There's lots of free information and great stuff on there. You also follow our podcast, the Money Ripples podcast. You can find on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you try to find those kind of podcasts.
And we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Such a pleasure. Appreciate it, Rocky.
That was a great conversation with Chris. And I think he got us to think a little bit differently about money, wealth, and financial freedom. And these are things we talk about all the time. Number one, the standard financial advice doesn't always give you the freedom that you want. And the other thing, which I love, get lean, get liquid, and getting your money working for you through passive investments. The reality is there are a ton of investments out there in the world that pay a lot better than Wall Street does. And of course, we have to have the right mindsets. We've talked about that so many times. And maybe the standard path works for you, maybe it doesn't. And even if you're going to use the standard path of 401ks, IRAs, there are some very advanced ways to use these beyond what we talked about today. Doesn't matter whether you're a business owner, employee, you got to figure out your financial destiny because nobody else is. Who else do you know that needs to hear this type of a message that's kind of a little bit different? I'd appreciate if you share the episode with them or just share it on social media. Next week, we've got Andy Height to talk about unleashing your limitless potential. I know you're going to enjoy it. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.